Hello everybody, this is John Hopkins with Baltimore Heritage, and we're back with another of our 5-minute Histories videos. And today I'm at the parking lot that the high school's Poly and Western share, and behind me there are bands warming up. There are trucks pulling in, towing floats. There are majorettes piling out of school buses with their pom-poms. The chaos is beginning to grow, and that's because this is the starting place for the annual Mayor's Christmas Parade. It's going to take place in just a couple hours. If you are following along real time, you know that we are quickly heading into December 25th, which of course is Christmas, but this year also the first day of Hanukkah. We thought we at Baltimore Heritage would celebrate by doing a video on this annual Baltimore tradition. But let's work our way up to that. Christmas parades were originally called Santa parades, and they are really like rolling pageants. You have floats with all sorts of stuff going on. You've got bands playing music, and at the center you've got Santa Claus, usually in a sleigh, or maybe even a truck, pulled by reindeer, often fake, but sometimes real. And this is a modern iteration of a thing called a Roman triumph. Back in those days, when the Roman army would have a victory on the battlefield, they would stage a rolling pageant. They would have carts full of stuff, usually the spoils of war. They would have bands playing music, and they would have the Roman general in a chariot pulled by horses in the middle of the parade. If you swapped out Santa Claus and reindeer, you would have pretty much the same thing today as they had back then. We, of course, in America never had a Roman triumph, but we have had Christmas parades since 1887. The first one, which is still going on, was in Peoria, Illinois. The folks in Peoria had just completed a bridge during the holidays and wanted to celebrate. So our first Christmas parade was on the water. The next year they moved it to downtown. And then the year after that, a local department store called Shipper and Block thought that it would be a great idea to sponsor it, good for their advertising. And so they did. In that first year of sponsorship, we got a Santa Claus in a sleigh pulled by real reindeer. Where the folks in Peoria in the 1880s got real reindeer, I have no idea, but they did. And then department stores in other cities caught on. Eaton's in Toronto began a Christmas parade in 1905. Hudson's in Detroit, Hudson's department store, 1924. Foley's in Houston began a parade there in 1950. And then, of course, the big kahuna of them all, Macy's department store in New York City. They got going in 1924. One of the features there was a balloon in the shape of Felix the cat, as well as live animals that they had borrowed from Central Park Zoo. We didn't get our first Christmas parade until 1936. It was called the Toytown Parade, and that was largely due to a gentleman named Ben Posen. Posen had worked for Macy's, I believe in New York, but had come to Baltimore to work for a department store called Hochschild Kohn, and he wanted to bring the Christmas parade idea with him. The problem was money. Each of those balloons that Macy's had, or Hudson's or whatever, cost $15,000, and this is in 1936 dollars. Hochschild Kohn wanted a parade, but not that badly. But then Posen learned of a guy in Pittsburgh who would rent out holiday balloons and floats and costumes, the whole 9 yards. And they could afford that. So problem solved, bingo. But the problem solving came with a bit of consternation and a lot of worry. You see, the floats and balloons that we were going to use on the Saturday after Thanksgiving were being used in Binghamton, New York the day before, that Friday. And the idea was they would deflate everything, put it in a truck, and drive it down to Baltimore on Friday afternoon so they could spend Friday night getting ready. But the problem was a huge snowstorm in upstate New York. Everything got put on the truck, and then the truck driver took off in a blinding blizzard and drove for 7 hours and found himself not in Baltimore, but back in Binghamton. Remember, this was the days before the interstate highway system. Posen was worried to death. He had sent out APBs through the Maryland State Police and the Pennsylvania State Police and the New York State Police. After a little bit of a nap, the driver got back in the truck in the dead of night in the snow still, determined to make it to Baltimore. And that he did, rolling into Howard Street at 7 o'clock on Saturday morning. Posen was ready with a small army of porters who he had instructed to go through the Hochschild Kohn store and pick up every vacuum cleaner that they could find and every extension cord. So with this army of Hoovers operating, they were able to get all of the balloons filled, and the parade, our first Toytown parade in 1936, started right on time at 9:30 that Saturday morning. The Toytown parade lasted until 1966, but then sadly ended. We had about a 6-year hiatus, and then in 1972, a young and impatient mayor named William Donald Schaefer decided we should start it back up again. He approached a gentleman named Tom Kerr, who was head of the Hampden Business Association, to see if he would lead it. Kerr said yes, on the condition that the parade would be not downtown, but in Hampden. That same year, the Mount Vernon Mill Company closed its last cotton mill, ending an era of the largest employer in Hampden, and Kerr thought that it would do a good thing to have a parade that year. And he was able to organize it. The first year was rather modest. It had 6 bands and 1 lone Santa, but it was considered a success. And the next year, along with his wife, Sharon, the two of them became master organizers and fundraisers. They've led the parade for 50 years. They've organized the parade for 50 years. So that next year, we had no fewer than 30 balloons, including a Humpty Dumpty, a Jerry Giraffe, and something called Mr. Rabbit. And Santa was allowed to bring his wife. Mrs. Claus got her own float that year, and things took off from there. Over the years, the parade grew and grew. We've had giant blue crab balloons. We have had antique beer wagons, a Natty Boh antique beer wagon. We've even had Revolutionary War regiments marching in their valor there. Since it is the mayor's parade, the mayor always attends, and usually in the back of a Cadillac, but actually not always. Kurt Schmoke, who was mayor for many years, participated exactly once, and Martin O'Malley participated before he was even mayor. As mayor-elect, he decided he would ride in the back of that convertible Cadillac to get things going. We have had a parade every year. This is now, I think, the 51st year, except during COVID, 2020, we did not have a parade, and we almost didn't have a parade in 2022, but by the skin of our teeth, pulled one together. So I'm going to wrap up and then go down and check out the bands and the floats before things get too chaotic and loud. But I do want to end by saying to everybody who's watching these videos, thank you and have a happy holiday.